The only thing I wanted to kind of throw out there before we signed off, Catch, and maybe just a quick conversation from everything I did this past week. And I'll have stuff in the war room on Thursday, and I've got enough to kind of spread it out over the next couple of weeks. But I thought one interesting topic, wanted to get your opinion on, and even Jason's opinion on, maybe to a certain degree, Alex. But I asked Steve Sarkisian kind of about his recruiting philosophy as relates to quarterbacks. And I thought he gave a really interesting answer, which is saying basically he wants to basically take one, each time, because he said recruiting quarterbacks is kind of a delicate situation. I think at one point, we started seeing like Tom trying to recruit two at a time, but then there's certain years where you're waiting on the one. It seemed to be, Catch, to me, the message to Arch that we are waiting on you. We're willing to wait on you, and you're our guy. Also seems a little risky business because, we've always asked Jason, like, hey, what's the backup plan if Arch doesn't come? And especially if it seems to be trending the way that they are, which several months ago, Catch, I said that there's a good possibility that Arch may announce in the fall. And everyone was like, that's BS. No way that's going to happen. It's going to be in the spring. You don't know what you're talking about, yada, yada. Well, we're about to approach into June, and we don't seem any closer to a decision. So, that was a very interesting thing. And I just want to kind of throw it out on the floor to see what everybody else thought when they heard that going forward, it's going to be maybe one QB a year.
Yeah, I mean, it was so clear he was specifically talking about Arch, which he didn't mention Arch because he can't, of course. But, I saw your tweet, too, Anwar, and had a big picture of Arch. I mean, it was so clear. I want to say hat tip to Anwar, too, because, people jumped your shit so much whenever you said, hey, he may, wait until the fall or who knows, maybe even, close to December before deciding because he wants to see how things play out. Everybody who thought you were or called you crazy and you're wrong and your sources were shit. And you know what, man? Your sourcing on Arch have been spot on. So tip of the cap to you, Anwar. But I think it's interesting. I mean, with the transfer portal, I don't think there's any set rules. I mean, ideally, you take one every year and you just kind of keep that thing rolling every year. But there might be some years, and I know this year the plan is to take one, and he was specifically talking about Arch Manning. But who's to say next year, man, if Hudson Card transfers and you don't get Arch, then
Malik would be the wild card too. Malik, he's a key part of the quarterback numbers game at this point.
But you might take two quarterbacks next year. So in a perfect world, yes, I think you're taking one every year, but I think it certainly has some moving parts in it, especially with the transfer portal.
Yeah, Anwar, I thought that there's a part of me that was like, no, yeah, duh. You're going to take in a perfect world, you just take one quarterback every year. And it's kind of the why it's such a game of musical chairs in recruiting, right? Like when we watched Cade Klubnik a year ago, all of the quarterback spots were kind of filling up. And it was like, what's he going to do? And then he picks Clemson and he gets Clemson's spot. And that, for schools that don't have numbers problems at quarterback, the goal is to take one. I think the biggest thing that came out of that was the overt messaging to Arch and its implications specifically with Arch, which was, we're going to wait as long as it takes. He referenced his offensive line comments from a year ago. And to the victor go the spoils, right? Because they end up signing this monumental offensive line class. I think we sound like little bitches sometimes when we say, well, they got a little lucky there, and it took a coach leaving and doing this, and the Pancake Factory, all these things kind of came together at once. It helped them out there. But, in the end, Sark got his guys, and it was exactly what he said when he was asked about it during the season, which is, I can go out and get anybody I want that's, below the guys that we want, but there's one group of guys that we want. There's one quarterback that we want. And we won't budge off of that. I think that from a practicality standpoint, it's not a good year in the state of Texas at the quarterback position. So I wonder what it looks like if they don't get Arch. I mean, Jason, you tell me, there's not an obvious –
No.
You remember when they missed on Rhett Bomar and it was like, okay, well now – go offer Kirby Freeman and go offer Graham Harrell. And there were all these guys that year that were next in the totem pole, and some were offended that Texas was only going in after they lost their guy. But there's not like a long list of players this year. So what may actually happen, Anwar, is that I wonder if Texas gets a quarterback. And that was the thing that crossed my mind. Will they even sign a quarterback in this class if they don't get Arch? Because if they don't get Arch, the way that it might unfold, it might just be kind of a body. And they're recruiting that position at such a level that unless they have a plethora of departures, right? Malik leaves, Hudson leaves. Suddenly it's like, well, what's our depth look like? And you've got, I think the portal is the saving grace now for all of these schools. So I think if Arch goes somewhere else other than Texas, what you might see is Texas wait to see what happens in the portal at the quarterback position, and that the guy in that class might just be someone who's not a high school prospect. But really interesting that he was so willing to, basically speak to the Mannings with the answer to that question. Like Jason said, without ever having to say his name, we knew what he was saying. And it did seem to be a very public, we love you and we're just going to wait for you and you do what you got to do. And if and when we get to a moment where we got to do something else, and we can do something else, but we're not flinching off of our number one target.
Yeah, he's asked the head cheerleader to prom. And he's not asking anybody else until she gives a decision. And so they asked her at the beginning of the school year, and they're going to wait all the way to the fall to see what happens.